Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar on understanding the ad revenue potential of an association app. We are going to get started in just a couple minutes. We've got a big attendee list. We want to give everybody a chance to join. So just hold tight for a minute or so, and then we'll get started. Good afternoon again, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar on understanding the digital ad revenue potential of an association app. My name's Edward Wendling, and I'll be your moderator for today. Before we get started, just a couple housekeeping items that I'd like to go over. First, all attendees for today's webinar are muted so we can have a smooth presentation, but we will be taking questions at the end. Asking questions is very easy. On the right-hand side of your screen, you should see the GoToWebinar navigation pane. Near the bottom of this pane is a question section where you can post your questions at any time during the webinar. At the end of the presentation, we'll go through as many as we can. And if you have any technical difficulties during the presentation, please also use the question section and we'll try to address those. We are also delighted to let you know that we are an approved ASAE certified association executive provider. Today's webinar is worth 1 credit, and that can be applied towards your CAE application or your renewal. To learn more about ASAE's CAE program, just visit asaecenter.org/CAE. And finally, at the end of today's webinar, after we finish Q&A, you'll be presented with a feedback screen. Please take a moment to answer the questions and let us know how we did. To receive CAE credit, we need you to complete that feedback so we have record of you attending. So with all that being said, it's now my pleasure to introduce today's first presenter, Brad Latour, COO of Clowdr. Brad, the floor is all yours.
Edward, thank you so much, and thanks everybody for joining us today. It's going to be a lot of fun. This is a topic that every single association executive that I'm talking to is asking about for obvious reasons, the reduction in event revenue. How do you make up for that shortfall? And not just for a short period of time. Many of us in the industry think these challenges are going to last for quite some time, well into next year. So I'm really excited to also introduce you to my special guest today, Charles Popper. He's the president of the Wyman Company. So Charles really will be able to give us a lot of very specific insight, guidance, and trends too. He's a guy who's had a seat at the table for well over 20 years now, is in the mix with associations. That's his primary market that he serves. And I think the reason why I'm excited to have Charles join us today is his approach. So he doesn't sell advertising. What he does, he gets there and becomes a partner with his clients. So it's one of the main reasons I always recommend our clients at Clowdr have a conversation with the folks at the Wyman Company, just to see if there's any opportunities that maybe you haven't thought of. And that's really kind of his value that he extends to his association clients, both state level, national, professional trade. He works with everybody. So Charles, welcome, my friend. Really appreciate you joining us today, and maybe share a little bit about what you want to accomplish today as well.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Brad. I mean, it's good to be here. These are interesting times, and I'll try to spare the group from any cliches. We all know we're in unprecedented times, new normal. We're going to try not to use the word pivot. I think everybody's pivoted out at this point, 2020. But, as Brad mentioned, I mean, we are in the revenue generating business, and we work with our clients to solve the non-dues revenue challenges that they have. And that's my hope today, is just to be able to share with you a little bit of a perspective around the best practices, what's working out there in the market, and how does that intersect with the mobile app and across the organization. So I have found that during these times, what used to be nice to haves have now switched to need to haves. So these best practices, pre-COVID, are really now the standard practices going forward. So, happy to take questions at the appropriate time and weave in a little bit feedback as we go through the deck today, Brad.
It's perfect. I appreciate that, Charles. And just for those who are joining us today, Charles and I are really going to share our thoughts and our comments. This is going to be very conversational, and we will, as Edward indicated, be taking questions towards the end of the presentation. And as really Charles kind of teed it up, what used to be a nice to have is really a need to have now. So where is the new revenue coming from? As a lifelong entrepreneur myself, I love the fact that difficult and challenging times always create innovation. And frankly, associations are not immune to that. They must innovate, or they run the risk, quite frankly, of dying. And when I am talking to prospects on a daily basis, clients on a daily basis, they seem to fall in really kind of two camps. So they are either looking for that innovation and they want to implement it faster, or they are retreating almost in a hunkered down position. And that always certainly concerns me. So I hope today that we can give you a little bit of confidence, some things to think about, some things to try, certainly have additional conversations with the both of us or individually following today. And from there, we can do what we can to help support the broader association market. And some of the themes today, perhaps you haven't thought about, but are likely right in front of you to take full advantage of without a lot of expense or any. And you can get most of these initiatives up and running very quickly. I think Charles and I are both going to spend a few minutes setting the stage before we get into just mobile itself. And Charles, even more so than I, has really great perspective in thinking about where we are today in more of a digital and mobile world than where we came from, especially for associations who were almost exclusively traditional. Here's a few stats that even myself in the business consistently are surprised by the shift and how fast the shift is coming. For those of you who have served in and around the association market for years, what's happening in mobile is almost the identical thing that happened when websites came around the mid to late 1990s, early 2000s. Associations found themselves asking the question, do I really need a website? Of course, that's a silly question in today's world. The exact same thing is happening with mobile. Do I really need our own association app? And I think today we're going to challenge that mindset a little bit and thinking about not just providing a great framework for your members to consume information, to share information, to communicate and engage with one another, but think about turning it into a revenue center, right? So revenue centers in advertising always follow where the attention is. The attention is in our phones, as you can see here. And Charles, I'd love for you to maybe share a little bit more on this topic of traditional versus digital, kind of what you've seen and how you think about not throwing necessarily traditional away, but how do you layer it in so that you can have a really comprehensive strategy?
Yeah. So first, just personal side note, Brad, talking about, being where all the attention is on the phone. Sunday morning is a hot time in our family where we compare our screen time trends for the week. I don't know if many of you have that feature enabled on your iPhone, but it's a reality what Brad is saying, and a little bit depressing too, how much time we spend with it. But there's a shift going on for sure. Nobody disputes that, and it has accelerated during COVID. I do think it's really interesting, and I see that two camps emerging in the association market right now. The first is, we're just going to hunker down and weather this time. And, we had one client of ours, we are in the advertising sponsorship exhibit arena. And we had one client who just said, we're done with our event. We're sidelining everything for the balance of the year and just going to try and reemerge in 2021. And, that gives a lot of concern for me and for that client that, they are losing this time when people need associations more than ever. I think that was one of the cliches I wanted to avoid, but that's the reality where they're just hunkering down and potentially letting a competitor in. The other camp is those clients and people that we talk to that are using this time to innovate and experiment and test and not be afraid to fail in some of them, knowing that when there is a return, they're going to emerge from this stronger and have more credibility and value with their membership. But just to take a step backwards for a minute, we've spent a lot of this past 6 months talking with our clients and talking with those large sponsors who are greatly affected by the loss of shows. And we've worked with them hand in hand, the sponsors directly, to try and first retain their dollars for other 2020 initiatives. We've also worked with them to keep the dollars with the association for future 2021 events. And the last resort has been to refund dollars. And we've been successful in that. And we've been successful around that for, I think, two reasons. One is our commitment to open communication and dialogue with those sponsors and the spirit of partnership. But the other thing is the reality of the market, which our companies are moving forward still today. And when we talk to people, when we interact with them, they tell us, look, we still need exposure. We need leads. We need to position ourselves as thought leaders. And more than ever, there you go again, they're concerned about ROI. And I think that's one of the reasons why this digital shift is occurring and accelerating is because the ROI is certainly very quantifiable. But I think the other thing, it goes back to my Sunday morning example, is people like dealing with mobile because they want to have their message, their brand in front of members, and their members are on their mobile devices. So
that's really insightful, Charles. Thank you for sharing that. And I don't do it every Sunday, but certainly my two eldest daughters, we use that quite a bit, as I know you do with your two daughters as well, and it can be scary for sure. Next topic I want to talk about as we think about just context in advertising for digital and specifically mobile is something that we hear an awful lot of. Do I really need a dedicated mobile app when I have a mobile responsive website and I could just drop the ads in there? And frankly, having a responsive website or any web asset that is responsive, from my perspective, is a requirement. I mean, we're rounding the corner into 2021. If you don't have all of your products that are responsive that can be looked at on an iPad or an iPhone or on the desktop, you're actually behind. So it's not an either or, it's an and the data is so overwhelming that having response and interaction with a mobile ad on a native device versus just a mobile web ad, it's not even close. So I thought this was a good stat and a good visual just to share for those who are still in the camp of uncertainty. There is a big a big separation between those two. So I'd really caution you to go far beyond that. There is no better example in my eyes than just looking at the key stats, with Facebook. And I think, again, for somebody who's in mobile all day, every day, if you look in the upper right-hand corner there and you see that 90% of Facebook's revenue comes from mobile, I mean, to me, that's a drop the mic stat. They're one of the largest companies on the planet, and 94% of the revenue is coming from mobile. It really wasn't too long ago when, all the analysts and business talking heads were debating if Facebook could actually make the transition from desktop to mobile. Clearly, they've done that. They've done that, very easily. And then something else that I hear consistently is, well, my members are older. Sure, I get it. Most members in most associations are older, but the fastest growing demographics on mobile happen to be older. So that's a myth that really just doesn't even exist. And you'll be meeting your members there, as well as you'll be opening the door to younger members who really are mobile first and or mobile only. So kind of the 40 and below crowd, they're expecting mobile. They manage their entire lives through mobile, but you're not alienating your older members as well, as you can see it in some of these stats. And I think too, that really what Facebook has done and all these other platforms is they have allowed for basically platforms to persist so that friends, family, in the case of, LinkedIn, other related businesses, can share the content. So these are the platforms. They're not the ones providing the content. And I ask, my clients as well as prospects all the time, what if you could be the mini Facebook of your association supported industry? That usually gets a pretty fun reaction, because they all say yes, as you would imagine. Well, it's a real question. You could be the go-to source if you had the right platform to make it easy. And that also, Charles, really kind of falls into context, right? So, you talk about this a lot, I know, when I've heard you talking to some of our clients, and context and relevance, and the days of counting everything that more is better. Talk a little bit about your experience that targeted is the best.
Yeah. Brad, as I mentioned to you, I looked at this slide and I first thought, you're talking to association folks and you're making an analogy with, Facebook. And I thought, how tightly is it correlated? And I thought about it for a little bit, that Facebook's success is directly attributed to their ability to hyper focus or hyper aim a message to a very distinct audience or a subset of an audience. And when I thought about that, I would say that almost everybody on this call has that same audience that's very niche, that you represent. So you have a defined audience. You represent X many individuals or companies within a industry. You may know the buying power of that industry, and you certainly may know the defined geographic area. And those are the same things, the advantages that Facebook's bringing. You have the same thing, but Brad, there's an added advantage in my mind, spending my career working with associations, that gets underutilized, is that you've got associations have a defined audience in a geographic area, but you also are the voice of the industry. And most associations are out there are either working from a lobbying standpoint, legislative agenda, certainly working to impact their members' bottom line in some form of fashion, which in my mind makes it a more valuable proposition than the Facebook example that you have. But targeted advertising is, that's why we like associations selling more than any kind of business, general business to business or business to consumer, where it's all a numbers game. In the association space, it's not about the numbers, it's about the quality and who they represent. And that's a unique value proposition that is sometimes overlooked in the association space.
That's a really good point, Charles. And I think about it as we buy, ads ourselves on LinkedIn or Facebook. Like, you're going through the exact same process, right? I want to target this universe of people, and you can get very, very narrow. And to your point, you can get very, very narrow as well with an association's demographic. So that's a really valuable point. Thanks for sharing that. I think it also dovetails into sponsored content, right? I know one of the things that I've always appreciated about your style is you don't silo sell, right? So you're not just selling a little ad in a magazine or a membership guide or something inside of an exhibit. You're thinking about total value and how do you leverage that sponsored content? I mean, when I talk about case studies, I'm using the broader market because they're the best examples. And we have a whole series of best practices around influencers and sponsored content, because an association actually has the ability to provide a platform for up and comers in that industry. And then that's also where you can target and layer in that sponsored content availability for your advertisers to say, I want to be aligned with this particular story in your newsfeed, to have this type of a display ad, to launch this type of a poll and have it more meaningful and relevance. Talk a little bit about how you have seen the value of probably bridging the gap between digital and traditional and that sponsored content approach.
Yeah. So, it's interesting. If the, marketers are going to do what they do. And I think we, and our clients have to find ways to tap into those marketers' budgets and perspectives a lot. And I think sponsored content is one of those areas that companies are producing a tremendous amount of content. And I think the type of content they're producing now, as opposed to what they were producing, say, 5 years ago, has changed dramatically. I mean, you really got great thought leaders, great contributors to the conversation, people who are looking to, be a part of the conversation. And I think that this is one of the reasons why I'm a big advocate of the platform, because it addresses so many of a marketer's needs, Brad. But, as an association, you can choose to play a role in this dissemination of content or not. And I think that the fact of the matter is I know some organizations may have concerns around editorial quality or blending the line, which I think are legitimate, but can be solved with establishing and managing around a set of parameters or guidelines that must be achieved in order to participate in the sponsored content. But, companies are doing it today. And I think either you can find ways to tap into those dollars or leave it to somebody else to do it. I also think too, and I think this is where, mobile is a critical part of an overall communication and engagement strategy, but it's not the only component of it. And, the thing is that if you're working with a company to disseminate sponsored content, you've got an opportunity to do it across multiple channels. And I always like that. If I can arrange for a sales package or proposition that is multidimensional, it's always better, because then you're not relying just on one avenue to move the needle. So, when we're working with companies to put out sponsored content within our clients' platforms, we're certainly looking at mobile. We may be looking at, webinars. We may be looking at email or blogs, but it's all tied in together. But I think that that's one of the great advantages of this, is that, what we're talking about, Brad, is not just putting a banner ad on the top or bottom, but is really finding ways to engage and engage the reader and also in a way that meets that marketer's goal, in this case, to be a part of the conversation.
Yeah, that's a really great point, very thoughtful, and it kind of speaks to that broader topic of just engagement, right? We don't want to just throw out a bunch of display ads that there's no reason to engage with it, but how about a display ad with a thoughtful poll to get the reaction across multiple channels? I think that's a really, really valuable point that you bring up.
Brad,
let's transition. Go ahead.
Ted, on that for 1 second. I think think about sales. I think everybody would agree that we should try and think about what is going to progressively make our job easier, not more difficult as time progresses. And I think that, this thought was triggered with you saying, well, we'll just throw up a banner ad or something to that effect. Well, that's a very binary. Did it work or didn't it work? And, if you want to think about, driving sustainable revenue, it should be more dimensional or multi-dimensional about that, so that it's not just that binary decision. What were the numbers? And if the number is above it, we'll renew it. If the number is below it, we're going to cancel it and move on. So I think that, that's really where a little bit more thought has to go in, a little bit more conversation. And in the case of, the Clowder app, is utilizing some of the different features as opposed to kind of the path of least resistance, which I've seen other groups do, which just says, hey, you can put banner ad here or here. That's not a sustainable model. And, we all wear so many different hats in our organization that let's try and make this one aspect of our job a little bit easier.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you talk about, Clowder, and this is not a Clowder commercial, so I just have it more broadly titled as an association app, really. So an association app, by today's definition, is really a year-round engagement platform. So that's what I'm really referring to. Of course, there's going to be many, many features that help drive towards that goal. It's going to all leverage proper mobile user experience. It is going to take all the positive cues from the likes of Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, all of Apple's design guidelines. Those should be expected, because you don't ever want to find yourself in a position that you think you have to coach and teach your members on how to use your app. It should be so intuitive because they're already using similar products. This is just almost your own private social network, just for the association and its members and its broader supporting ecosystem. So these are ways to think about how to use the framework and layer in things like we've just talked about, the sponsored content, sponsored polls. For me, I love sponsored polls because it allows the advertiser to really leverage the association membership almost as a virtual focus group. So they can propose questions and built-in answers that are most important to them. And then, of course, you use things that are unique to mobile, like push notifications and reminders, so that it will trigger more replies. And whether a advertiser is interested in, is this a new product or service or certification that the target market I serve is interested in, use a poll for that and capture that very important survey information, something very easy to do in a year-round association app. Certainly sponsored push notifications. At this point, push notifications have almost become, breaking news alerts, right? So we all have them, whether it's ESPN or your favorite news app. Something comes up, you see 2 or 3 lines on your phone, the headline, maybe you click on it, maybe you don't, but you still feel informed. That split-second acknowledgement is worth something. Where you have features that are more member-to-member focused, like a forum, think about ways to drop in forums that might be sponsored. Maybe there's a really hot topic a particular advertiser's interested in. Why not give them an opportunity to have context next to that topic and advertise there. Or resources. Every organization, part of their asset value is the resources that they provide. So maybe you are giving your advertisers the opportunity to sponsor an entire category of resources and allow them to access it, aligning that content with the advertiser's name and the brand. Of course, we do, would expect in any association app to have nice, clean display ads, specifically so you have context for Clowder. We offer 3 different types of display ads. They can be just display image, image plus title, or image plus title plus brief description, which is kind of what you see on your left-hand side. And then we're also seeing a growing number of our associations are getting their entire app underwritten by a master sponsor. So that master sponsor has the opportunity for their brand to be shown every single time the association app is opened. And I think, what you're hearing from Charles is that in and of itself is probably not enough, but there's only going to be one of those locations. So you'd likely build a package around these layers of value. So you will get the only splash screen sponsorship. So there's some scarcity there. Then maybe they get some key locations of display ads. Maybe they get to do an advertorial post once a month. So you're starting to add all of these assets to create a more engaging really package. And then of course you can charge more for it. Back-end analytics, Charles, you talked about this already, ROI. That is one of the great reasons, in my opinion, why we've seen such a shift from traditional to digital, because everything is trackable. What have you seen? What's your sense relative to analytics? Are you being asked for more by both sides, by both your association clients and their advertisers? How has that trend changed in the last few years from what you've seen?
Yeah, so, I'll tell you where we're working with our clients to move them towards and delivering. We used to just sell, right, on behalf of the organization, and the catalyst has been the sponsor, the company, and they have to really justify that ROI. So when we think about a sponsorship program right now, our methodology is to have a conversation with them and to be able to understand, acknowledge, and what are their business objectives that they're looking to achieve, and then how do we align the different offerings to support those business objectives. But after coming up with that is really reporting on what the results were. So you rewind the clock back, and it was it first was, well, here's our menu of offering, and I promise that 80% of the people on this call have the menu of gold, silver, bronze. Pick one, or check the box of which sponsorship you want to have. That's the way it used to be. The next evolving practice around it was more customization, like I just spoke of, around business objectives and aligning offerings and audiences to business objectives. And now it's gone a step further, which is closing the gap to say, here's the goals you wanted to achieve. Here's what we did to position, you against the various audiences. And here is the return on the dollars that you spent. So that could be, back-end analytics from the Clowder app or another mobile app. It could be impressions on a newsletter or a website. It could be traffic when we get back to having events. But the bottom line is, if you're not doing that as an organization, you're going to need to be, if you want to make your jobs, to selling a little bit easier. And I think that's a big thing, Brad, is that when you're selling to a sponsor on behalf of an association, or if you're an association, your job is to understand what dots need connecting and then connect those dots. And if you're not helping them justify the ROI that they just spent with you, you know, they're going to have to go back to a committee or a group or a decision maker to say, here, we need the next 10, 20, 50, $100,000 for next year. It's really on you as an organization to make their sales job easier internally. So, you know, when you ask where's the drive coming from, I don't see associations pounding down my door to say we've got to justify it, but the sponsors are asking for it for sure.
Yeah, that makes tons of sense. I appreciate that perspective. It's you know, probably been there for quite a while, and my guess is it's just ramping up more and more as dollars are tighter and tighter on the marketing front.
Yeah.
A couple of examples I'd love to share, and these are, you know, full disclosure, a couple of Clowder clients that I just think do a really inspiring job of taking everything Charles and I have been talking about and actually putting it into practice. I'm a kind of a visual learner myself, so I think it's important to actually see it. And Charles, you're probably not as close to these, but please feel free to jump in to see how you react to some of the things that they've done. And one of the things I love to do with our clients is to talk about and really remind the association of their value in the existing assets that they already have, which would trigger an individual to become a member. In this case, American Baseball Coaches Association, they have a bunch of existing assets that the app has made stronger. So they have a podcast that's really, really popular, but what they did is they made it easier to access the podcast by placing it really inside of the app, sending out push notifications, pinning new posts inside of the news feed, creating a podcast archive in their resource center. And because it became more and more popular, it just naturally drew more opportunities for sponsorship. And you'll notice in both of these images, the podcast it's sponsored on the left, and it's not really a big ostentatious display ad. It's, you know, sponsored by TeamBuildr in this case, but it doesn't always have to be. I think you go back to your earlier comment about layered approach. So now this TeamBuildr brand is associated with this podcast, and they must like the content that they're talking about in the podcast because they want to be close to it. They also have a really effective video library that's a revenue generator for them. So just because that's not part of the app, they pulled it into the app for easy access. Once they did that, they saw a 25% jump in the traffic to that revenue generating video platform. So they're very thoughtful in how they're looking at their assets and saying, how do we combine some of this value? When they look at it internally, then that makes it very easy for the advertiser to buy it. I like it because it's simple, it's clean, it's very topical. It makes it, you know, it makes an awful lot of sense. And most important with any advertiser, it's relevant. And I think that is very helpful. Do you see anything additional that maybe I haven't brought up, or how, you know, from your lens this could also be helpful for another association?
Yeah, so a couple things. One, I mean, you said something that I totally agree with, is that simple sells, and I think that that's something that we should all think about as we, you know, consider our own sales activities. That the more complex, the more moving parts, you know, usually the harder it is to close. So when you say simple sells, I mean, that's the thing, you know, how easily and quickly can you communicate something, because, you know, and it be absorbed, and then they can reposition it and hopefully not lost the essence of the value proposition. So that certainly resonated, you know, with what you said. The other thing is just looking at this, Brad, you know, and seeing this sponsored content, it does go back to that methodology that I just spoke of a moment ago, which is understanding a sponsor's objectives and work to align those objectives with the different mediums that you have and the different audiences that they, you know, are in front of. And by the way, if you don't know who, if you don't know the top 20% of your sponsors driving 80% of your value, if you can't articulate what their business goals and objectives are in these COVID times, or now starting to think about 2021, those are things that you should be doing. But this also triggers another thought to me, Brad, is that, one of our clients, which is a very large road building association, we are working to reposition their sponsorship program. Part of the methodology of repositioning their sponsorship program is talking to their top sponsors. What are they looking to achieve? What's worked well in the past? What have they done with other organizations that they'd like to see more at this one? And that really helps to shape it. But I had a conversation with a very large equipment company, and he said, Charles, I want to be a part of the conversation, and I want to be visible. So where the members are, I want to be. And, so I think about this example here, and what you speak to is that those objectives that were articulated to me can be achieved in other ways, but it certainly can be achieved with what you're showing here, with somebody wanting to be a part of the conversation and where the members' eyes are. So I like it.
No, that's great. I appreciate the feedback on what you've seen here for the first time. Another example here that comes in the framework of virtual event, right? So as the physical events were canceled, many of our clients use the framework of their association app and dropped in links, video, live feeds, surveys, Zoom links, just to make it easier. And then, they could keep the conversation going. And I think, as we look at ourselves compared to kind of the legacy event apps, the starter was there. So a lot of associations became fairly good at monetizing their event app. The problem is it was only there for 1 to 3 days, whereas an association app is for the whole year. So you can extend the discussion. You can start the discussion far earlier. You can let it peak in and around the virtual event, and then it has a tail to it. This client is a user group, ASI. It's an AMS. Some of you are probably familiar with it. And these are some of the actual statistics that they did. And this was from an event, a live event. It was supposed to be a live event. Then in a matter of 2 weeks, they transitioned into a virtual event. And it went so well, they added 3 more virtual events of the same framework. So they used basically everything at their disposal. So they used, news post impressions, all the clicks, the likes, the events, and they dropped in sponsored display ads, certain posts that were sponsored, and then of course just ads themselves. So this is where they were dropping in their ads so that their sponsors could actually get some real yield. Back to that topic, of ROI that we were discussing before. They were able to give back directly to their sponsors, tangible metrics. This is what you got with your display ad. And something I thought was really cool that they did that I don't think I would have thought of is they weren't afraid to transparently share with the advertiser how they did against other advertisers in certain mediums. So, if you look at that top one, they got 571 impressions, but they shared globally with all the advertisers how they did against, in some cases, direct competitors, in some cases, just, additional companies in the same ecosystem. So, I don't know if transparency is something that's being asked for more of. I guess probably it is, based on your comment about I want a seat at the table, right? Most good advertisers do probably want that seat at the table. So I thought that was a really smart approach because you're going to see it anyway, right? If you're in the medium as a user, you're going to see how you stack up against others that are also taking advantage of that same medium.
Yeah, Brad, I like this though. If I'm an advertiser, what I would also be interested in is the potential click-throughs on this, because what that gives what that would allow me to evaluate is the effectiveness of the ad, of the creative in the ad. So, I mean, the medium certainly drives a lot of engagement and behavior, but there is a portion of it that's on the, the responsibility of the advertiser or sponsor to say, you got to have some great, collateral, great creative in order to engage the eyes that are going past you. So.
That's a really good point. And I think, as we kind of start winding down these specific examples, I want to make sure that we leave some time for some questions at the end. But I did also want to share a live example. This is one of, it's a Clowder client. And I think it really speaks to the fact that the FBI, NAA actually sold the entire value of the app to Verizon as their title sponsor, I think is the term that they used. So every time one of their members is accessing the app, they're seeing, that it's sponsored by Verizon. So I know there's a ton of value. They have been a title sponsor. I think I'm correct, and it's going on now their third year. So it's proving itself out. I think, you made a really important comment. If you give someone just the menu without a lot behind it, you run the risk of, what's going to happen at renewal time. Here, they're layering in a title sponsor with a variety of other things, but there's only one title sponsor shot. So there's, it's coveted. There's some scarcity there that they can use to their own advantage. Couple other things that we have in terms of how do we provide value to those who are on the call today. We have a pretty slick sponsorship guide that we use with our clients that anyone who is on the call today is going to have access to. So we're going to actually just send you this sponsorship guide as a value add. Maybe it will trigger some new thoughts and ideas on, how to leverage. If you already have a mobile app, you can, layer it in. If you don't have a mobile app and you think we might be a good fit, we'd love to have a conversation. But it could also trigger some new ideas with, your non-digital advertising and thinking about that layered approach. Other things that we have for you to consider on our website, we've got a full resource library. In that resource library, we've got COVID-19 resources, we've got mobile guides, we also have recorded webinars, and then we also do a weekly blog post called Native Notes. So tons and tons of content there. Our communications department does an amazing job pulling together resources that will help you think about mobile as a key tool to add. We do also have a demo app. So if you wanted to go in and see how display ads looked, feel free to download that. It's available in both stores. It'll just ask you to create an account, which is nothing more than your name and email address. Then you'll be approved. You can navigate around, see how some of the advertisements have been layered into the app in different locations of the app. If you're just frankly unsure if your organization is ready to bring on mobile, we've got a pretty simple mobile assessment to get you thinking about when you might be ready. And then this last one, Charles, I'd love for you to spend a little bit of time on because this is an incredible offer where you are going to do a limited person boot camp. It's a couple of hours at no cost. So for those who really want to kind of hit that innovation level, why don't you speak to what they could expect in these 2 hours, the value they'll be able to extract, and once you're done there, let's maybe take some questions if we have any.
Yeah, sounds good. I think also I need to apologize because I just realized that Brad, you put 2 headshots of mine in this presentation, which is probably too. But, we love putting these on, and these were popular pre-COVID. They've been very popular now during the times where you just need to figure it out. And we've worked with a lot of the allied societies. So the Texas Society of Association Executives, Colorado, Associations North, which is Minnesota, Virginia. We just did Wisconsin, in hosting these association sales boot camps, because we see a couple things in the market. One is that, the need for non-dues revenue has never been greater. It's going to only continue to get exponentially, A, more difficult to capture, and B, harder, from a staff time perspective. So we created this association sales boot camp to help associations sell more effectively. A lot of people who are selling for associations are not salespeople by training. They're the communication person who also has to sell ads in the magazine or other form of media, or the membership person. So we know that association people who have a revenue responsibility, many are not salespeople by training. So that's what we try and do, is help make you better at your sales job, wearing that sales hat, by understanding the value proposition that your association has to offer, how to communicate that, and through your collateral, and how to act on it by layering in some proactive sales activities. It's not a stuffy lecture-based 2 hours. If it's a great fit, if you want interaction and brainstorming and bouncing ideas off of each other. If you want to put the camera on, blank and on mute and multitask, it's a terrible offer. But if you're not too comfortable in the sales role, or need to take that non-dues revenue to the next level and have a little fun while doing it, it's a great couple hours.
That's a really generous offer, Charles. I appreciate you doing that for everybody who's on today. If you are interested in this, please email Charles directly. You can see his email there. And when we say this is limited, it really ideally is limited to maybe 5 organizations, so that you can get that interaction. So if you have any interest at all, I would encourage you to email Charles directly, set up the time, and I know that you'll certainly get a lot from it. If you wanted to dig in more on Clowder, certainly you can email our director of sales, Billy Barnes, just billy@clowder.com. Clowder.com is our URL. If you want to poke around, check out some of those resources. And I do want to be mindful of time. We've got about 7 or 8 minutes left. Edward, bringing you back into the fold, have there been any questions that have been proposed for Charles or myself, or perhaps both of us?
Yep, I do have a couple questions. And before I get to them, just a reminder to everyone that's on the call, if you have questions, you can ask those in the questions section of the GoToWebinar pane. So go ahead and put those in now if you have them. We'll answer the remaining few questions we have and then get everybody out of here on time. And reminder, just fill out the feedback form when you close the webinar. So first question I have, which is a good one, is how are associations deciding what to charge their sponsors for in-app advertising?
Yeah, so I think, Charles, I'm going to let you dig in. What we've seen is every association is a bit different. Typically, when we are assisting one of our clients with just the mobile advertising, we're a component. So it's all the other opportunities, and they're charging additional money for the mobile app. Charles, jump in here and maybe talk some, if you have any specific formulas to share, or maybe how do you leverage just the mobile component and some, of course we do have, a handful of joint clients. So I know you've gone through this a little bit before.
Yeah. I mean, Brad, I wish there was like a very clean formula to say, take this, multiply it by this, and divide it by that. You got everything you need. And it's, unfortunately, it's just not as, it's a little bit more art than science. And I think there's a couple things, though, to help. First, I think you've got to look at, what are the other assets that you have available that you market? You know, if I called any one of you on the phone and said, I'm looking to position my company in front of your members, tell me everything you got and how much is it? You know, it's great to have that information in front of you prior to, figuring out what's the right amount. I also think, that when you settle on a price, I think this is a good best practice is don't wait for the app to be live to start selling it. Sell it prior to it going live and make those sponsors and advertisers a part of the promotion around the app. So, when you're marketing the app to get people to download it, you now have added value for the sponsor, for the advertiser to have aligned their brand with those marketing messages. So that would be, best practice number 2. The third is don't do the path of least resistance, which is just saying, I'll throw it in with your other gold level sponsorship. So, I guess the formula is going to be look at everything that you have, think about selling prior to launch so that you can incorporate those logos into the promotion of the app, and don't just roll it in and take that path of least resistance and make it a part of an already existing sponsorship package. If you're doing that, or if you have the inclination to do it, you need to challenge yourself on the deliverables that go with that, because they're probably not strong enough anyways. And just throwing one more thing in the mix isn't going to all of a sudden create exponential value again. So,
thanks, Charles.
That's a really good point, Charles.
Yeah, great insight. Next one, maybe kind of related to this, is what has the response been from sponsors utilizing mobile advertising? So I take that to be the actual advertisers.
You want me to take that one, Brad?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Well, I think it depends. And, and I go back and, I reiterate the same points over and over again because it's what moves the needle. If you have had a conversation with somebody and understand their objectives, and if their objectives can be achieved through this vehicle, mobile as an example, then the results have been good. If you're looking just to place somebody there because as a placeholder or as a thing to fill this seat, the space, the results are mediocre. And I think, that's an important thing to acknowledge, is that, if you're not having the conversation and trying to connect the dots, then it doesn't matter what you're trying to sell. The results are going to be suboptimal. So,
yeah, and I would just add, having mobile gives you a lot more freedom and flexibility for the type of ad, right? So, by contrast, if you are doing a quarter page in a magazine, once you approve the ad, it's gone, right? If something pops up, you can't edit the ad. What we see to be very valuable is embracing the flexibility and the real-time nature of mobile in and around all the other things that you see in mobile. So when you're scrolling through your news feed on Facebook or LinkedIn, what gets your attention? Video gets your attention. So why wouldn't you go to, a handful of your top advertisers and say, you get to do a 30-second video that we're going to drop into the news feed. We're going to pin it to the top of the news feed for 3 or 4 days and allow you to almost speak directly to our membership. So it gives you a lot of opportunities to include them kind of in the process of feeling like they can contribute more directly to the audience.
Great. And one last question we always get. You answered it earlier, but just want to make sure everyone hears it, that you will get a copy of the recording. You'll get an email from the GoToWebinar system that will include a recording. And then you'll also be followed up by the Clowder team with a copy of the sponsorship guide that Brad mentioned earlier. So with that, we're almost at 3 o'clock. So I'm going to go ahead and close it off there and say, great job, guys. And any last words, Brad, before I close it out?
Just thank you, Charles. Really appreciate you adding the dimension that you did here, doing this for so long, and really help guiding associations through this difficult time that frankly is just going to position them for a much stronger foundation going forward. So appreciate you joining us today.
Thanks for the invite. Appreciate it.
Okay, thanks
Got it.
everyone, and have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you.